All right, ladies and germs, we are coming to you on Sunday. We're going to talk about the rest of the weekend's matchups. We're going to refrain from diving into what we saw yesterday and the few days previous.
Coming soon, though.
But that
Hopefully
is coming
tomorrow.
soon. Yeah.
We'll get you a little recap of the weekend. Maybe Tuesday. We'll let tomorrow night's game play out. Maybe we'll see how the time goes. But overreaction may be coming. But let's stick to our guns.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk a little bit about the matchup tonight. We get a little treat since NFL is still not in session for regular games. And we get a Sunday night matchup between the Oklahoma Sooners and the Houston Cougs.
Yeah.
And it's actually, this is going to be a good one. I mean, it was, look, I don't want to dwell on this weekend's games, but the matchup of the weekend was Auburn, Oregon. Didn't disappoint. And so I'm really excited about this game.
I agree. I would say here is more of what we're looking at. We had some games we discussed, we previewed earlier, that are – there was a lot of unknowns in some of these games. I don't know if I would call this game an unknown because there have been some changes, and the impacts of those changes is what I think draws the most interest. We certainly have historically high-powered offenses versus defenses and how they react. So, if this plays according to past history of the teams, this is going to be a pretty significantly high-scoring game. So the question is, though, what does it all look like? So why don't you go ahead and lead us off, and you can start on either team and tell me what you're seeing.
Okay. Let's go, obviously, to the Oklahoma side because they're the ranked team in this. And, yes, changes. Let's talk about changes.
Sure.
The biggest change, notably, is Mr. Hurts at quarterback.
Who's that?
Mr. Jalen Hurts. And, look, Alabama, the fans, I don't think they have any remorse for the fact that the guy transferred out of there. He, I think, will go down in Alabama history as a guy, maybe not certainly not the greatest thing since sliced bread from a quarterback standpoint, but just – quality kid, class act, good head on his shoulders. He never talked junk. He was a humble guy. He just shut up and did his job, and it really helped Alabama in times of need the past 2 seasons.
Well, let me add to that. 100% agree. I want to say this. The transfer rules right now are an absolute disaster. The NCAA the NCAA is like the government to me. They find new and amazing ways to absolutely screw something up unlike anybody else. Nobody understands the transfer rule. It's gotten all the press. Can't figure out why kids are having to wait forever, why superstars are getting the first plug, and then why other guys are hanging around. Let me go back to Jalen Hurts on this. This is what the rule was intended to do. This kid... And I'll say it, he didn't pull a Kelly Bryant, and I'm not dogging Kelly Bryant, but he didn't pull a Kelly Bryant. He sat there and stayed on a team that really needed him. Let's be honest.
Absolutely.
If you watched the title game in the SEC last year, they needed him.
Yep.
But he knew he wasn't going to get that spot this year, and he's not void of talent. He may not be on the Tua. Certainly not on the Trevor Lawrence scale. But the other part of this, too, is what I really like is that he fits this offense. It's going to look a little different. This is not Kyler Murray.
No, it's not.
Not Baker Mayfield.
Baker Mayfield. It's not.
Right.
They're going to have to design plays for him to use his feet.
Yep. He is going to have a more purposeful running with him. They are going to call running with purpose. He's tough. Kid's not he's not going to go down without a fight. And I think the amazing thing about him is his quiet demeanor. He's going to come in there and he's going to work, which is what you need to do when you're coming to a new team. It's Russell Wilson going to Wisconsin mentality of where he just came in and said, look, I know I put up all these numbers, but he went out there and worked. I don't know that they'll get the results. I expect actually better results for Jalen Hurts from a team standpoint. But we'll see. We'll see. It's week one. We're not going to overreact, but I just really, there's so much to like about this kid, and the way he handles his business. And unlike some of the other transfers, this is a kid that went somewhere that really made sense to me, and that's what I really like about him. So I agree with you 100%. Look to see the kid have a great year. I just like him. I'm going to follow him, and certainly see what that plays out for Oklahoma.
Yeah, Heisman hopeful. You got to put his name in there simply because Oklahoma has owned it the past couple years, and at the quarterback position at that. So Lincoln Riley knows how to, put those guys in the limelight. So I expect big things out of him. It's going to be, in my mind, there's a big question mark, obviously, with Big 12 defense. So how that impacts him on the offensive side of the ball, I think, is going to be interesting to see.
Yep.
I believe in Jalen Hurts, but not being a guy like Baker or Kyler who's skying the ball out.
Yep.
It's, how is that going to play out, quite frankly? Is that going to help the defense that it's going to be kind of a slow and steady wins the race? I mean, I do expect their offense to still be high-powered, but I don't think it's going to be what we've seen in the past couple years. I think it's going to slow down a hair so that they can draw up some things for him to move around, run the ball, hand off, read option, what have you. And so is that going to help the defense? That could actually help
potentially. Yeah, I could see it.
Vice versa, if this, and we'll dive into the new D coordinator, Alex Grinch, that they brought in at Oklahoma to really have that, the Big 12 defense sucking idea kind of for a team like Oklahoma who just needs a little bit there to really put themselves over the top. Is it going to have that impact? So, who's going to impact who, I guess, on each side of the ball with Hurts there and the new D coordinator?
I think it's actually, again, I go back to the perfect kind of marriage concept of a scenario like this. I mean, it is tough bringing in a new quarterback in the first year. I look for them to still play tempo. I don't think we're going to be looking at the Alabama grind it out, move the clock, and this year Alabama's a little bit, and we'll go back to this, a little bit stronger on the, I would say, the outside players, the wide receivers, than they have been in the past. Not as much of a one-man show. Right. We'll get into that a little bit later, but the idea with Jalen Hurts is going to be, I think you're going to see more power running concepts. I mean, you got to understand here that if we go back to Baker Mayfield, you're talking about a kid that carried a team on his shoulders. Their strength was the fact that when the plays break down, he's a gamer and could make a play. While he ran, a lot of his running was behind the line of scrimmage, creating opportunities for receivers to get open and still push the ball downfield. Kyler Murray, on the other hand, when the play broke down, could be gone in a flash, but still designed to stand back there and try to move the ball down the field with his arm and then make the big splash plays with his legs when they opened up. There was some designed running with him. They had to be a little bit careful. He is undersized. With Jalen Hurts, I could see a little bit more of a power run. So I guess what I would say is, while still quick strike, my expectation will be that, to your point, they'll chew more of the clock, in which case that's going to help your defense.
Yeah,
and so
keep them off the field. Let them get rest.
Yeah.
It's funny because, I don't want to liken them to Ohio State, but from a quarterback position, they are able to insert. I've never seen bad quarterbacks at either school. Now, can I say Ohio State's quarterbacks of the past few years have been that of Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray? I don't think so, even as good as they may have been. But it is kind of it hankers on that situation. Like, here comes the next guy, and they're not going to drop off. Here comes the next guy, and they're not going to drop off. And when you're talking about the quarterback position, the most important position on the field, that's my hat's off to the coaching staff.
Yep.
Because that's how that happens. I'm not saying the kids don't have talent, but in order to rein it in and really make the best of it, that's all coaching staff and the schemes we talked about it in a past podcast, adapting to your players.
Yep.
And, so my hat's off. Now, we'll talk more about the recap of this weekend, what we saw out of Justin Fields. Well, it's yet to be seen with Ryan Day, but here we go. Tonight, Oklahoma, Jalen Hurts. Let's see if that trend continues with Lincoln knowing how to work with the guy he's got at the helm and put him in the best position, not just to succeed, not just to win, but quite frankly, the way it's been at Oklahoma, it's been to be a superstar at the quarterback position.
Yeah, and let me kind of get into the coaching part, which will kind of make more sense with the defensive coordinator and the impact of that. What I'm really what I'm really interested to see. So let's just step back a few years. You've got Bob Stoops, and Bob Stoops, even look at the evolution of that man. I mean, again, as a Florida State fan, I remember him coming in and playing Oklahoma, and while it was one of the worst to watch, I have to admit, national championship games, that was a school predicated off defense. And Bob Stoops being a defensive guy, through his tenure there, that school evolved into a high-powered offensive program.
Yeah.
So he evolved as a coach. Now, what I'm really interested about with Lincoln Riley is, this guy was handed the keys to, I don't know if maybe I'd call it a Ferrari, but certainly $100,000+ car. So
really nice Corvette, Porsche. What do you want?
Yeah, and with that, also handed Bob Stoops' brother as defensive coordinator. And, so you look at it and go, is this guy just going to run the Bob Stoops playbook and try to stay within himself? Very quickly made that decision to make the change at defensive coordinator, and you got to think about this. This is the guy that gave him his chance, and he's got to let go of his brother. And so what that tells me is this guy's got a vision. He's got a vision. He's going to play it his way. Now, again, if he is that guy and is as smart as I think he is, this move at defense also tells me the Jalen Hurts thing is he is going to adapt the game to Jalen Hurts. And I'm really interested. I like this coach that they got. And I'll tell you one of the biggest reasons I love him. He comes from the Buckeyes, which I'm not going to get all high and mighty on that. That's a team that defensively brings in talent year after year.
Right.
And I know this is your boy, but let's talk about where he was at before that and what he did with Washington State and our boy, Mike Leach.
The mad scientist.
Yeah.
He's great. But again, smart move. Leach was at Washington State, got there in 2012. So Alex Grinch, the new D coordinator for Oklahoma, again, you mentioned it. Last year was at Ohio State.
Yep.
Prior to that was at Washington State. Leach brought him in 2015. He was there till 2017. And keep in mind, Leach is a mad scientist because he's an offensive guru.
Yep.
So this is just kind of falls in suit with why I love the guy so much. And it's very much like Dabo, okay? Let the coordinators do their thing.
Yep.
The guy's an offensive mind, Mike Leach, has an impact on the offense and with the offensive coordinator, but the guy obviously is not going to stand there and say he's the best defensive mind in the college game, and brought in a guy that he felt was, that could really help their high-powered offense on the opposite side of the ball.
Yeah, and Leach understands, he is not going to bring in a defensive coordinator at Washington State. We're not bringing in the biggest names in college football. So you have to be smart and understand what these guys are going to do. And I kind of want to go what I like about what Leach did first with this gentleman, but then also what's going on at Oklahoma, because let's not kid ourselves. He's going to have a lot more toys to play with at Oklahoma on defense, certainly as the future goes on in turn, especially if the defense is stronger, than he's going to have at Washington State when he comes out. And you think that there's no defense in the Big 12, which there isn't a lot of times, but man, let's go out west. You're not finding most of the teams, not all teams, but most of the teams are struggling defensively. It's this concept, and this is what I like, and where I was going with this is I go to the NFL. The new hot trend is get the new hot offensive guy, right?
Right.
But let's look at two of the best examples in pro football and the success they've had, and that's Sean McVay and Matt Nagy. What did they both do? They went out and got coordinators that have a big background, they have head coaching experience, and they said, that's your side of the ball.
Sure.
Go do it.
When not to cut you off, but if you know the story of Wade Phillips coming to the staff at L.A., McVay pretty much, I mean, I don't want to say begged, but he was begging. And when Wade accepted the position, I mean, the guy was like honored. It was so, he felt so good. It was a comfort level there.
Yep.
You know, look, just like you said, I don't want to worry about it.
Yep.
But I've got somebody that I have complete trust in is going to get the job done the way I need to, so I can run my offense and this team is successful.
And then moving on to Nagy, because that's certainly, that covers it. And just look at the proof; it's in the pudding. But then going to Nagy is the best thing he ever did as a new head coach was convince Fangio to stay. And let's look at that. Fangio's a head coach now. How he'll do as a head coach, we'll see, because that's a very different ball game. But he was one of the premier defensive coordinators in all of football, and for Nagy to get him to stay after being underneath John Fox was a tremendous thing. And now look at him. He picked up Pagano, who is another guy who's got head coaching experience. He's already said he wants no parts of head coaching again. But my point is, you can leave that guy to do his work. Now, in these college scenarios, we don't quite have that level of experience, but it's about finding guys that can take something and make it better with a product already, because the recruits will come if you do that. And I think this is a perfect example. I think Lincoln Riley is well, he's going to be head coaching this, and I think he's going to be, looking at it. I think the way I'm taking from all the things that I've read and heard, that they believe that they can leave this guy to go and do it. And I think going back to the offense, it's the perfect complement. If they're going to control more of the clock, like you said, they'll keep their defense off the field. And this could be actually a better mix for Oklahoma than the other two quarterbacks, just from a mix standpoint. I'm not saying Jalen Hurts is a better quarterback, but I'm just saying this mix it just really is a marriage that looks good to me. And I'm excited to see it.
I'm excited too. Yeah. I mean, again, I think that the offense is definitely going to succeed. Yep. They're going to take a step back a hair from that high powered that you're used to.
Sure.
But by all accounts, the Big 12, the bad defense, what's kept the Big 12 and, well, Oklahoma, what's kept them from moving forward. They've managed to break into the college football playoffs. What's kept them from moving on to the championships, and the whole world knows it, is they can't stop anybody.
Right.
And so then it becomes, when you get to the college football playoff and they're one of the four and whoever they're going up against, the 2 years they were in it, it was, well, Oklahoma has the best offense in the country, so it doesn't matter what their D is going to do. They're just going to outscore everybody.
Yep.
And as we've seen, that's not the case. When you run into a defense that can make plays, maybe not the whole game, but can make plays throughout the game and stymie that high-powered offense, and there's a high-powered offense on the other side of the ball, well, that's a recipe for trouble.
Yep. Yeah. And again, where I'm getting some of this from too, to add to that, is what tells me that that's the scenario is that Grinch was allowed to bring in some guys defensively. So this wasn't, I'm going to pick my coordinator and then I'm going to pick all his assistants for him. It wasn't one of those types of head coaching decisions. It was a guy they brought in. So Brian Odom, like inside linebackers coach, was under Grinch's staff. He was a quality control guy. So again, bringing in your guys that understand what kind of system you're going to run, which is, his system is very aggressive. So I expect to see a lot of press, a lot of blitzing, that kind of stuff, and see how that plays out. And if you start getting turnovers and are controlling the clock, that wins in college football.
Yeah,
it does.
Yeah, it does.
Especially if you can score a lot.
Well, personally, I liken it to the situation. I had a little situation coaching my 13-year-old daughter's softball team, and I was asked to help coach. I've had been a head coach before. I didn't volunteer because we went from 2 seasons of softball where I was a coach into this 3rd season straight, so I was going to take myself a break. I was asked to help, and there was a head coach and 4 assistant coaches, of which I'm one of them. Long story short, had a little incident out there, didn't really agree with the way the team was being coached. There were a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and not all of us were on the same page, at least me. And that's okay. If I'm the one with the problem, then and I bowed out. I just took a step back because I didn't feel like I was helping them. The team, there were some fundamental things that I really felt needed to be done. The reason I say all this is it could have been very easy for Lincoln Riley to hire the guy and put people underneath him that Lincoln Riley chose. But the guy knows you need to have people all on the same page. And so he allowed this new defensive coordinator to bring guys in that he knew he could mesh with well and that would all be on the same page. And that's how you get a recipe for success. Because the last thing you need is disruption amongst the coaching staff. That will just, you're not going to succeed in any way, shape, or form if the coaches are not on the same page. So, to your point, it's great that, I was a little long-winded, but it's great that Lincoln Riley did allow him to bring in his staff. And you do see that a lot in not just college, but in the NFL. There is becoming more of that, allowing them to bring in the people to allow them to be successful. So it's pretty cool. I expect definitely a different type of team than the Oklahoma of years past. But let's flip it over a little bit because I think the reason that we're excited about this game is the opponent.
Yeah.
Houston is not. Oklahoma's preseason ranked number 4. Mm-hmm. Houston's not. And we'll talk a little bit about what's going on here. But, Dana Holgorsen is now the new head coach. West Virginia for years. Some really high-powered offenses there. You have some well-known quarterbacks and receivers that have gone on to the NFL from West Virginia under Dana Holgorsen. So he moves on to Houston. Mm-hmm. He moves out of a Power 5 conference into a Group of 5 conference. But I look at this Houston roster, and I can see, especially for an offensive-minded coach, why he would have been eager to take the job. There are some players on this team.
Yes, definitely agree.
So we'll start right at the dark horse Heisman candidate in Houston's quarterback, De'Aaron King. You want to talk a bit about De'Aaron King, or can I talk about De'Aaron King?
Well, you seem excited, but I'm going to chime in. So, let's just say this. We're talking about a kid that's going to bring some excitement.
Yeah, this should be, and with the new D coordinator, it's right out the gates a test. He's being tested right out the gate because if it's still the bad defense in the Big 12 in Oklahoma, or I don't know if I want to call it bad, but just not up to snuff, you're going to find out tonight real quick with De'Aaron King. So De'Aaron King, excuse me, not a big guy, 5'11", 195. He's a senior. He's from Texas. Okay? Mm-hmm. This guy, he's a spark plug, my friend. I'll be honest. I heard of him last year, but did I really dive deep into De'Aaron King? No. Mm-hmm. Now that obviously the first game, they're the only game on the slate. It's a night game against a big team. He's gonna get a little bit of props.
Yep.
All right. Now keep in mind they're a Group of 5 school. They're in the American Conference. This guy has been an Earl Campbell Award finalist, a Maxwell Award finalist, a Manning Award finalist. He was a Davey O'Brien Quarterback of the Week. He was an Earl Campbell Award Player of the Week. These are all last year. Yep. Just last year. He's a senior. So dating back to 2016, right, when he was just getting in there starting, he had Players of the Week that year. He won the American Athletic Conference Honor Roll, which says he's a smart kid.
Yep.
He's not an idiot. So there's some things that this kid has to offer that the world will see tonight.
Absolutely. And just give you some more highlights on this kid. And again, we can talk all we want about the conference that they played in, but this guy was responsible for the record of the conference. with 50 touchdowns responsible for. So that's going to be your running, passing, despite missing 2.5 games. Okay. So the kid is offense on demand.
Yep.
He is. He led the nation in points responsible per game with an average of 27.5 points. That's and this is an interesting part. 4 points ahead of the number 2 spot shared by Kyler Murray and Dwayne Haskins. Now you can, and you can look at his competition and everything, and you can say, well, that's the way it goes. But the fact of the matter remains, like Kyler Murray and Dwayne Haskins are playing with a few more ponies than this kid's playing with.
Yeah.
And just some highlights to touch on that. Going against Texas Tech last year, he had 5 rushes for 32 yards and 2 touchdowns and went 30 of 51 for 431 and 5 touchdowns against Texas Tech.
Somebody get that kid some ice for his arm.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, you're talking about he put up 413 yards in the air and 3 touchdowns against Navy. So, I mean, you're talking about guys that, again, you have to understand the level of competition, but you also have to, take into consideration what he's got with him. So this is, a team that has proven dangerous to a lot of teams. Now, the concern is obviously when you lose a talent like that, potentially with an injury. So, and you're up against this team, but I guess what I like is they are going to push all the things we talked about with Oklahoma. They're going to make meaning Houston is going to make Oklahoma prove that stuff true. It's not going to be, we're going to just put our heads down and you're just going to roll over us. It's going to be, I think, a fun game. Oklahoma needs to win this game. I don't think this is a big win-win for Oklahoma.
No, I mean,
I think
if they win, it's expected. If they don't win, then it's a disaster. I mean, so, all the pressure is on Oklahoma's side in this thing. And keep in mind, I mean, good. Yeah, it's the level of player in the conference. You touched on it. Oklahoma has been able to work with a lot of ponies, but from the Big 12 defensive stigma, and granted they're a group of 5 in the American, but let's just, I'm just going to run down the American current members in the American Conference. Central Florida, Cincinnati, Connecticut, Eastern Carolina, Memphis, South Florida, Southern Methodist, Temple, Tulane, Tulsa, Wichita State. I run through that because there's a few schools in there where the defenses, I don't believe, are a sieve. All right? So from that perspective, is the level of athlete, is the level of competition the same across the board as the Big 12? No. But in terms of apples to apples, and them playing with the athletes that they have on their team against the athletes on the other side of the ball in their conference, the defenses, I think, have been more formidable that he's faced. So if this Grinch guy doesn't get up to snuff, and to your point, he played a Big 12 school last year in Texas Tech and was successful, it could be a challenge for Oklahoma if they're not ready to go. There's not any slow starting that's going to be allowed, because if it is a lose-lose for Oklahoma, then this is just gravy for Houston, okay? Yeah. And if this kid, De'Aaron King, who's a senior, obviously a smart kid, has been there before, he's going to take this and like he's got a huge lobster dinner in front of him. The butter is just melting hot, dripping off the lobster, and he's tying his bib around his neck, putting his little mini fork in hand, and ready to go to town. Okay?
Yep.
So I find this game to be going to be exciting, man. I mean, I think it's a good matchup. Could it get out of hand? It could, but I don't think this kid is afraid to, even if they're down by 2 or 3 scores, to make a comeback.
Yep. Let me say this: if Oklahoma can do what we just talked about, what I'm thinking I'm going to see out of Oklahoma, they could gap this game. But the problem you have is you say you want to make them one-dimensional. Houston kind of comes out one-dimensional.
Yeah.
So they don't really change their game plan too much. You need to run the ball, and you can't rely on your quarterback to run it all day long. But they are quick strike, so I don't think time is of a factor with them. So I think it's going to be kind of interesting. I've been trying to figure out for quite some time and look this up, and I don't know if you've seen anything. I'm assuming, now it's strange because understand Houston has also undergone huge coaching staff changes. Holgerson has left West Virginia.
Yep.
He's taking over.
You see his son is a backup quarterback on the team?
I did not know that.
Yeah, he doesn't even look like he's from the Dana Holgerson
Family tree,
but Logan Holgerson, 6', 185 freshman. But he is, I assume it's his son because his bio says that he went to high school in Morgantown.
Somebody check out and find out what the mailman looks like. Because he don't look like Dana.
Maybe the pool boy?
Hanging out in the cabana.
Boy.
All right, so what I guess will be interesting is, again, they've revamped their entire coaching staff. I mean, if we look a little bit at Holgerson at West Virginia, we're still expecting high flying. Question will be on defense. What they do. I mean, certainly this is the part that Houston's going to have to handle. And Joe, I'm going to say his name wrong, Cawthon. I'll admit I don't know much about him. His coaching background is from the smaller schools. Most recently, he was at Arkansas State as the D coordinator linebackers coach from 14 to 18. Before that, some work at Middle Tennessee, Valdosta State. So he's been in some smaller programs, but known programs. So let's not, dismiss that right away. It's going to be about what he does as they got rid of D'Onofrio from the past staff. Obviously, we know that Kendall Briles.
Is that Vincent D'Onofrio, the actor?
Maybe. You never know. Got to look it up. Got to Google. So you got him. Now, the other part, too, which is where I'm going to try to figure out where the play calling's going, is they got co-offensive coordinators in Marquell Blackwell and Brandon Jones. So I've been trying to do a little bit of plug-in here and was looking up earlier, and I'm not really getting a sense, but my feeling is that Holgerson's going to call the plays, but I could be wrong. So the question is then, how does this all mesh together? The guy he brought over, Marquell Blackwell, was the running backs coach for West Virginia in his last year there. Prior to that, some previous stops in Toledo. He was on Florida in 2015. And then prior to that, just some smaller gigs. So he is one to see. I got to find out. And then Brandon Jones, who is an offensive line coach, lead me to believe if there's going to be a coordinator calling plays, I would assume it's the guy that coaches the quarterbacks. Just seems to make sense for me.
Yeah. You'll see Holgerson heavily involved, especially if the offense with a guy like De'Ara King is not clicking the way they want it. I would anticipate him quickly getting involved in that process.
Right. And let's just say, not to get into too much of the drama piece of it, but Holgerson leaving West Virginia was not an amicable divorce. There's a lot. Some of his players coming back and making comments about him. And again, there is some interest to the fact that you went from a Power 5 to a Group of 5. So that'll always come into play. But Houston's on the upper echelon of that group, and certainly is. And let's not kid ourselves. You're hanging in the state of Texas, so you got recruits.
Well, that's the De'Ara King came from Texas. These kids are it's one of the biggest high school football states. At one point was the hotbed recruiting ground for high school football. States like obviously Florida, California, even Georgia, where we are starting to catch up.
Yep.
But Texas is big. And there's a lot of football, and it hasn't changed in eons for the fact that the Friday night lights, those little towns in Texas are shutting it down to go watch some high school football. Why? Because it's good stuff.
Yes.
And they've got some athletes. Yeah. So, you're just naturally going to get some guys to come over there just because you're in that state. And, you see it with all the programs there. All of them. Baylor, Texas Tech, as not nationally renowned as they may get, they always have some sort of freakish athletes on those teams.
Yep.
And they make plays, and those players come from the state. There is somebody else I do want to touch on, and that's the wide receiver for Houston, Bryson Smith.
Yep.
He's He's going to be the go-to guy, I think, for De'Aaron King. This is their guy. He's 6 foot, 190 pounds. Not the biggest guy, but he can go up and get the ball, man. He's going to be not just their wideout, but their return guy. He's really good at both. I mean, this guy shows some flash that could take him to the NFL.
And mind you, as a freshman, this guy saw action at receiver, quarterback, running back, and then the 2 returner spots, that's a lot to put on a young kid.
We're not in high school.
No.
You're not supposed to play both ways. That's a high school thing.
So he's clearly got the talent to make this offense hum, and King's going to need that. He's going to need that.
Yep. So that's one guy outside of, obviously we're going crazy over De'Aaron King, and I am very excited to see this guy again. I knew of him last year. This game has really put him on the forefront, and as people dive deeper into his past, resume, he's good.
Yep.
And there's, as I dive deeper into it, he's good.
Yep.
And as Lincoln Riley in Oklahoma and this Grinch guy dives into it, you better know he's good.
So this is the kind of game, I think it's the Heineken commercials where don't hug your friends, don't answer the door because you might miss something.
Yeah.
It's going to be back and forth.
It could be. The one thing, again, I think harkens back is, how is it going to be back and forth with the Oklahoma defense?
Yep.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, you got Jalen Hurts, exciting. He's a superstar on the field to watch. You got De'Aaron King, exciting. He's a superstar on the field to watch. Oklahoma has skill players at wide receiver and running back. Yeah, they may have lost Hollywood Brown and Rodney Anderson. They've got horses just to reload, not to rebuild on the offensive side of the ball.
Yep.
You got the new coach and Dana Holgerson over at Houston. But at the end of the day, this is going to be the Alex Grinch show. This is the Alex. When this game's over, he's going to be the guy everyone's talking about, either in a good way or a bad way. That's just what I believe, because that's the key to Oklahoma taking the step beyond the first round of the playoff and making it to the championship.
Yeah, the Oklahoma is definitely a team that's got the potential. I would say right now, my feeling on the playoff is you're dealing with, and I'll kind of open it up a little bit. I will say you're dealing with the winner of the SEC West. Notice I didn't name one team. You're dealing with Clemson. You've got Georgia potentially, right now looks like the class of the SEC East. Not saying that's a huge step. So how that plays out in the championship will be more to be seen. And so that really kind of leaves the potential for a 3rd and 4th spot that could be opened up. And Oklahoma, I think, certainly is going to garner the attention to see what they can do, to see if they can be one of those teams.
Yeah, I mean, we know I don't want to again dive into a recap of the weekend, but everybody kind of was hoping based on yesterday it was time for the Pac-12. And and I love Justin Herbert. You know it, man. I've spoken very highly about it, and I still do. I think the guy, he can't do it all on his own. That's not what you can do in college football.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, I think that was, if we're going to talk about Oklahoma, the Heisman winner, Kyler Murray, the Heisman winner, Baker Mayfield, as great as they were, they couldn't take their team to the national championship game, so you can't do it alone. But I do think highly of Justin Herbert, but very disappointing for Oregon and the Pac-12. So it opens doors, is what I'm saying here. For right out the gate, the door is open for Oklahoma.
Yep.
And if they don't show tonight, well, then they just open the door back up for a conference like the Pac-12.
Yep.
Or possible, Big Ten. I don't know if the SEC could get a nod for 2 teams. I don't know, but possibly one of the conference getting 2 teams in. So Oklahoma needs to show out. We are going to move on here.
Yep.
We certainly are excited about tonight's game. I think I'm more excited about tonight's game than tomorrow night's game, but we do have Monday night football in college. Mm-hmm. Not to surprise anybody that the team that gets that game is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
Yeah.
Because, like the Cowboys, I guess they're America's team.
Yep.
I mean, like, how long is that going to go on for? I mean, when I was a kid, they were America's team. I certainly don't think either of them are America's team. I was a Notre Dame fan when I was a kid. I was a football player who wasn't. in the 80s, 90s growing up. But yeah, they get a lot of love, and as a ACC homer, and they're in the ACC and everything but football. We're watching yesterday and you see the ACC network commercial, and there's the Irish on there.
Yep.
Boo. Boo on them.
Yep.
Okay? I know you got your big money deal with NBC, but if you want to be part of our conference, I know we're basketball. Football is what brings it in nowadays. So you need to commit to us in football.
Yep.
I digress.
Yep.
I digress. Let's talk a little bit about Notre Dame's game tomorrow night.
Okay. I am
Sorry, I just kind of left you hanging out there.
That's all right.
Who they got, Dave?
They're going to play the two fingers up, one thumb out, Louisville Cardinals.
Woo!
Louisville is not projected to have a strong year this year, so this matchup doesn't bring on paper as much to be desired. There's no magic that I see from this from Louisville where they win this game. So we can kind of dive into it. We'll probably spend a little less time. And again, I can be proven wrong at times. But we'll dive into that and talk a little bit about what we see.
Okay. So now we're going to talk about one game tomorrow night, Monday night, and that is Notre Dame and Louisville. Is the game being played in South Bend? I believe so.
Yeah.
So we'll talk a little bit about the Irish first, and I'll let you talk a little bit about that and weigh in on it as you go, and then we'll flip it over to...
This is actually in Louisville.
Oh.
Cardinal Stadium.
Oh, I guess it's probably a home and home. They probably had them last year in Notre Dame.
Well, understand this is part of, and this I'll get into this with Notre Dame. This is part of Notre Dame's agreement with the ACC is to have 5 ACC conference games per year.
That's right.
So this will fill in for it. It's not a one spot deal. So that's why you're seeing that.
Okay. Well, you got the Irish then going into to Louisville.
Okay, so I'm gonna give my take on Notre Dame.
What was the preseason rank for Notre Dame?
Number 9.
Number 9. Okay.
So here's been my problem with Notre Dame overall is just when it comes down to playing the real deal, Notre Dame historically, and when I mean historically, certainly under the Brian Kelly years, has not performed. It's very hard to swallow some of their records when you look at some of the teams they played and the way they've played some of the games. So, while it's a little easy for me to hate on Notre Dame, I just look at how they perform. So with Notre Dame, I think what you always have to do is you have to look at their schedule.
Right.
And being the fact that they are an independent.
And they don't have a conference championship game because football is technically not in the ACC for them.
Yeah, so, and I'll dive into that a little bit later as we get onto it, but kind of talking about what Notre Dame's perceived strengths are, not saying they're inaccurate. Notre Dame last year, to give you an idea, one of their biggest believed strengths this year, which you have to take it with some sort of grain of salt, was their offensive line. They're expecting their offensive line to really be a strength of their team, which is going to be important for them from scoring points. Now, understand something. They fielded the 106th best offensive line last year. That's per Football Outsiders, but just giving you a general idea of stats and where we're looking at. So, that kind of tells you a little bit, for where they came from. And the idea is just that they are going to be, they're certainly going to be a good team. Now, something that to understand about the offensive line for Notre Dame is that they have, in starting last year, they lost their offensive line coach, Harry Highstand, to the Bears. And he is really known for being one of the best offensive line coaches. And if you look at their drafting over the last few years, they've put some guys in there. You're talking about, the guard from Indianapolis. You're talking about the tackle, McGlinchey.
McGlinchey.
McGlinchey, sorry.
And I just fell out of my chair.
He was so blown over by my analysis. He went to San Francisco, so this guy's put some guys in the pros. They took some steps back last year, and so it'll be interesting to see. So if that's going to be a strength of their game, and again, they performed well in some big games last year. Again, they played well against Florida State, but I'm struggling to really see that after last year as a big quality win. On the offensive line. But that being said, if their offensive line comes to play, they've got some things going on offense that I think will benefit them. The question is, can they play with the real heavyweights? They bring back after Wimbush has headed on. I believe he went to UCF.
He did.
And they've got Ian Book, who is a senior. And this kid is really known for, I wouldn't call him certainly a game manager. He is more known for his short passing game at this point. A little more heady, a little bit better at reading a defense, better reactionary, a better student of the game. So having a good offensive line is going to be important for them. So he can go ahead and take that forward and make this offense explosive. And what they've done too as well is they've got Cole Kmet, I think I'm saying his name right, who is going to be a player that I think is going to be important for them in 2019, a tight end to help open up their offense. Their receiving core is going to get to be little bit more of a perceived strength. They had some high-flying players back in the day, guys that went pro or fringe pro players. They look to get that back. They've got some big receivers that can burn down the field. So just look to see what kind of offense. Do they start moving on to that second level in the passing attack, which is going to be really, really important? And then can they find the receivers underneath? I mean, they got Chase Claypool, Chris Finke, and Michael Young. All have been known to have, been told to have strong springs. Again, though, it's so hard to really anticipate Notre Dame every year because it's just their schedule is such a variable. To get that year after year, how are they playing? And the thing that
keep in mind, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I do. Cole Kmet, the tight end, is 6'5", 250. He is going to be out 4 to 6 weeks. He broke his collarbone back at what's this date? He broke it earlier in the month.
Oh, did he?
Yeah,
I did not know that.
like the middle of August. So they project him to be out 4 to 10 weeks.
4 to 10. Holy cow.
Yeah.
Okay, so
sorry, what did I say? 4 to 6.
Yeah, 4 to 6.
Yeah,
so they're going to be
10.
Yeah. So you're talking about an offense that's going to have to rely more on the outside. And again, they've got size at receiver, which helps offset some of the tight end game. The question is, do they have the quarterback that can push the ball down the field? And that has not been shown. And what's interesting this year is this is probably one of their more challenging schedules they've had recently. In the sense, there's I'll admit, there's a little bit of crying coming out of South Bend because of who they play before each of their big games. As I look through the schedule, I mean, they've got 4 games that I would say they're going to win. Out of the gate. Beyond that, in their ACC schedule, which again does not include Clemson, is still tough. I mean, they got to play, Louisville's one of their walkover games, but they've got to play Boston College, Virginia Tech. I think could give them a battle, though. Boston College, put a move on them yesterday. So, they've got to play Michigan, and they've got to play Georgia. So their offense is going to have to take a step forward. So that's what I'd be interesting to see is how dynamic can their offense be because truthfully, I've not seen the dynamic nature that everybody expected out of Brian Kelly when he came out to Notre Dame.
No. And, just to chime in, I know you were kind of hankering on them, and I'm going to talk about Louisville, but, they lost the running back that was really good for them last year, Josh Adams.
Yep.
Okay, well, I think he went to the Eagles.
Yeah, a late rounder, I believe.
And then, the stud of their defense was Julian Love in their secondary, and he got picked up by the Giants. So they have some holes to fill on that team.
Yep. Yeah, defensively, again, I think it's going to be more how the offense plays. You start leaving these guys out on the field against some of these tougher teams.
Sorry. Adams was 2 years ago. Last year was Dexter Williams. He, too, has moved on.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of where you're looking at. Like, I guess my point is, I think I'm not going to learn a whole heck of a lot about Notre Dame from this game. You know, it's going to be, do they have depth on their defensive line? Can they stand up? And I believe the Georgia game is. Am I crazy? Is that pretty early this year? I believe. Is that next?
Yeah,
is that next
it should
week?
be. Next week I think they
Yeah.
go to Athens.
Yeah, so I think we're going to find out more then. I really, at this point, Notre Dame is always going to be a struggle. What I don't want to hear from Notre Dame, certainly, and Notre Dame fans, well, I don't mean to pick on them, is I don't want to hear about your schedule. This is what you have accepted as being an independent and some of the elitist mentality that comes with, Notre Dame being the independent. You set your schedule. And, again, if you're going to complain about playing, the ACC and tough schedules, you didn't get Clemson this year. So
Yeah.
it's, it's not really something there. And you went out and scheduled Georgia. SC is a down year for SC. Like, you got to handle SC this year.
I know. It's not their fault, but that's kind of the issue. Like, I mean, they do have a formidable schedule, especially to not have a championship game to play in. It still can stand, I believe, on its own if they're successful.
Yep.
The problem they have is just like anything. I mean, it's just like any conference. It's like the rest of those teams that you're going to compete against throughout the year have to be decent or better than decent. And to your point, SC, now maybe we'll see a flip around because certainly Helton's on the hot seat there, and they're doing everything they can with Harold to switch the whole flip the script, go spread. Second year of this started as a freshman, PJ Daniels, so maybe that'll change. But they're at the mercy of the other teams on their schedule doing well for them to look good.
Yeah, so, again, this is why this game's tough to talk about, is because I just don't think Louisville's going to bring us any light bulb moments with Notre Dame. My initial impression, and I'll admit, I hate preseason rankings. I wish they'd wait till at least like week 3 or week 4 because you just, like I said in previous podcasts, this is overreaction week. And so you're going to have guys that we've written off teams already that shouldn't be written off at this point, meaning just the general college football fan bases.
Right.
So, you got to wait and see. To me, early on, 9 sounds a heck of a lot like Notre Dame, happy. Sounds like a little bit of a setup for Georgia to make that game a little bit more viable, but I could be wrong, I want to see what they do. I just don't think Louisville's going to bring it, but I want to leave that to you to tell me, am I right or am I wrong?
Sure.
Or somewhere in between.
Well, before we bounce from there, I mean, keep in mind, they are smart. I do give them credit for at least when they're bringing out a conference game, they brought in Georgia for this. They are doing a home and home. Georgia is very strong right now. If they look good tomorrow night against Louisville, and then they go to Athens and do their thing, keep in mind, they were upset at home. I mean, I don't know if you want to call it upset, but they were beat at home. Georgia went to South Bend last year and owned that stadium.
Yep.
I didn't get there, but I live in Atlanta. There are Georgia fans everywhere. I can tell you, everybody that was a Georgia fan I know was making a weekend out of it. The Braves were up there playing the Cubs. The Falcons were up there playing the Bears. And an hour and a half away, Notre Dame and Georgia was playing. So Georgia fans came in droves to South Bend and owned that stadium from what we saw. So there might be a little angst on the Notre Dame football side. I mean, I'd hope Brian Kelly tries to find some motivation from that because they're going to have a task against Georgia. That said, if they bring it to Georgia, whether they win or stomp them, it's going to be a tremendous help for that program. I'll jump into Louisville. Nobody really likes Bobby Petrino, I guess. It's funny. I type up Louisville football coaches in Google, and they bring up the little pictures of, past head coaches, and there's one of Bobby Petrino in the friggin' neck brace. I mean, the one picture they have is him in the neck brace.
He needs to get some Geico, man. He has some motorcycle
He needs
issues.
to listen to Nick Saban with the new Aflac commercials.
Maybe ride solo instead of with hot undergrad.
So, look, they're on our side of the conference. They're in the Atlantic. They're in the ACC. We know I'm a Clemson homer. You're a Florida State homer, but they brought in Scott Satterfield this year.
Yep.
Bobby Petrino experiment is over. He was there. He was gone. He was there. He was gone. Hopefully that is this is permanent. But Satterfield, I watched the ACC Media Days, and they interviewed him. I like this guy. From an ACC perspective and a guy that, I love my conference, I think this guy is going to be good for the conference. I like Scott Satterfield. So for those that don't know, Mr. Satterfield was a wide receiver. He was a quarterback at App State from 1991 to 1995. In 1998, he was made the wide receivers coach at App State, and he was there through 2008, then left, went to Toledo, then left there from 2009. The next year went from 2010 to 2011 to Florida International, and in 2012 comes back to App State as the offensive coordinator, and then in 2013, he takes over App State.
So that would have put him at App State, if I remember correctly, for the first of all, oh my God, what just happened wins.
That's correct.
Against Michigan. Okay.
That's correct.
All right. Interesting.
Okay, so I like this guy. He seems more like a lunch pail type guy. Okay, Bobby Petrino was an arrogant dude. He had a great offensive mind, but I think that broke down over the years. And I like what Satterfield's mentality is. Obviously, with his success at App State, not just in their, conference, and I believe during the 2013 to 2018 head coaching stint, they moved up to D1. Mm-hmm. Okay, he did great things for them in beating Michigan. He obviously it shows he's the type of coach that probably stands in front of his players and knows how to motivate them in a way that it doesn't matter who's across the field. Mm-hmm. You play your game, no fear. There's nothing to be afraid of. There are a bunch of other 18 to 22-year-old kids just like you.
Yep.
Okay, they put their pads on the same, they tie their shoes the same, they snap their helmets on the same. So he must find some sort of way to really just inspire kids, and I like that. I like that a lot. Now, we talked a little bit about Grinch, the defensive coordinator from Oklahoma, and Lincoln Riley really kind of giving him the keys to the defense and bringing in a staff that he could mesh with.
Yep.
So they allowed Satterfield to do the same. Okay, the guy, he was he had his defensive coordinator. What is his name? Brown is his last name. I'll get you his first name. Brian Brown. Mm-hmm. He was with him at App State. He had one of his other coaches, Ponce, I believe it's Frank Ponce, was also a coach on his staff at App State. He was the quarterback's coach and passing game coordinator. Mm-hmm. Okay. Right now, both of those guys have been brought to the staff at Louisville. So you got Brian Brown now brought over with him as the defensive coordinator. You've also got Court Dennison, who is another guy that was with him at App State. He brought over to be the co-defensive coordinator.
Yep.
Okay. You've got the guy I talked about, Frank Ponce, who is the quarterback's coach at App State. He's bringing him over as the quarterback's coach at Louisville. So that's just a few names, but obviously, the D coordinator job, because Satterfield is more on the offensive side, mm-hmm. He's going to let his coordinators do her thing as all good coaches should. But he was able, the Louisville, program allowed him to bring the people he thought that would make them successful. They were bad last year. They've been bad since Lamar Jackson left. I hope for their sake this is a little notch up, and this is big. This is like, just like you said with Houston and Notre Dame, this is a no-win situation for Notre Dame.
Absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely.
or Houston, Oklahoma. This is a no-win situation for Notre Dame like it's no-win for Oklahoma. It's just gravy for Louisville. They can go in, and they're at home. It's a night game. It's the first game of the year. And if the strength of Notre Dame is their offense behind their veteran quarterback, Ian Book, I mean, we saw, Trevor look good, but his stat line wasn't great. I mean, typically the first game of the year, the offense is what's going to struggle.
Yep.
So I say that all to say is, this guy has taken on the Giants before with lesser talent.
Sure.
Okay, I think that Louisville might not be the greatest, but they're going to have more talent than App State.
Yeah,
even the talent that's sitting there.
And something that I can certainly understand. We joke a little bit about Bobby Petrino, but character isn't exactly following that guy.
Correct. And if you, go ahead.
I guess the feeling coming out of Louisville this year. And this is honestly very similar to what happened at Florida State, so I can kind of understand this. This team in 2016, shared the Atlantic Conference, and they had some talent. We're still talking about Lamar Jackson. But in 2 years, they go winless. I believe they went winless last year in the ACC. So they took a big fall, and the belief is a lot of this is out of a lack of heart and effort. Coming from the team, they had many of the same problems: blown assignments, unnecessary penalties, all this stuff that plagued the Florida State team. And so they had a similar situation. And the point of that is that with the right attitude coming in, the cupboard's not as bare as it may look from previous years. And if you can clean up those things, and you mentioned it's fundamentals, if you can be a sound fundamental team, you can win and compete in games that you're not supposed to. So I think that's the charge of Satterfield, is to can he do that with what he's got, and see what happens. And let's just say, again, going back to that App State, up in the big house win, crazier things have happened. So while I may not see this as one that Louisville's got a real shot in from the outside perspective, I'm still going to watch it, and I still want to see what happens.
I think the guy's proven that they could have a shot against the big dogs.
Yep.
Again, with a lesser team, with lesser talent. And I don't want to say, to the App Staters out there, I'm not dogging you by any means. I mean, I think that when he took over, and it wasn't, everybody marks, like you said, that Michigan game, that was really just kind of the beginning. When did that happen? That was like,
2005 or something like that.
Look, this program at App State, continued beyond that game to be a dominant program in their conference. And you don't get elevated to D1 from D2 by not having the ponies there. And that I attribute that, again, I always say it. College football is all about the coaching. And to go a little deeper, I said Brian Brown is the defensive coordinator. He also brought in another guy Dale Jones, that will be a co-defensive coordinator. He also brought in two co-offensive coordinators. One of them I mentioned was Frank Ponce, right? And the other guy is, I'm not sure if it's, I think it's Dwayne Ledford. And I'm not sure if he was with him or not. No, he wasn't. I think he was with him years ago, but he brought him in most recently. Dwayne Ledford was the running backs coach at NC State. I will say that again. Dwayne Ledford was the running backs coach at NC State.
You're talking about some guys.
That's what I was hoping to hear out of you.
You're talking about some guys.
One thing that they've been able to do at NC State, and not just at that position, in several positions. I'm not a Dave Dorn fan, but NC State put some guys into the NFL. every year.
Yep.
And most recently at the running back position. Okay, they have some guys that have come out of there that have gone to the NFL, may not be starters, but have had success and are still there. So that's pretty good. On top of that, with these two offensive coordinators, much like my Clemson Tigers with Tony Elliott and Jeff Scott, they have one of the guys that will be responsible for the run game and one for the pass game.
Okay.
I like it. It's obviously a method that we've been able to be successful at Clemson. So, it's cool to see other people kind of take that step. I say all this to say, again, I think this guy knows how to motivate kids in a way like, it doesn't matter who's on the other side of the ball, pal.
Yep.
Just, do your job. You do your job. We play our game. We don't play their game.
Right.
Okay, so I am a little excited to see it. I certainly, I don't want Louisville to become this juggernaut because I'm a Clemson fan, but we as a conference could use them coming out of the bottom of the barrel. As being a solid team, a bowl win team. That's what I hope for every team in our conference.
Sure.
So I do think it'll be an interesting game. I am more excited about tonight's game, but it is a game to watch. There's nothing else on. Like I said, Notre Dame gets the prime time all the time.
Yep.
So it'll be a fun game to watch. I think that's really. I don't think we really need to go crazy talking anymore about that game or the other. We've talked long enough. But I do want to preview that tomorrow we will probably get into the recaps of the weekend prior to the Notre Dame game, hopefully. If not, we'll do it Tuesday and have it up. But give a listen before tonight's game and tomorrow night's game. Certainly, we're always open to comments. And enjoy. Look out for those people we were discussing, and hopefully you learned something and can apply that as a college football viewing fan.